The report looks at several statements that Tanton made that have been, in my opinion, just ripped out of context. I'll just talk about one here. It comes from a story in the Detroit Free Press about Tanton in 1997, and it has this passage. Casting an eye toward the traffic jams, crowded schools, and social divisiveness in California, many fear that unfettered migration could eventually swamp the nation. And then switching to Tanton, in his characteristically blunt manner, Tanton explained his obsession with immigration, likening the flood of humanity to America's shores over the past 400 years to a plate of bacteria in a medical lab. Quote from Tanton, "You put a bug in there and it starts growing and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and it grows until it finally fills the whole plate. It uses up the medium and then maybe it crashes and dies." Now this language is a definite sign that John Tanton was not an English major. It is, shall we say, inelegant. Worst of all, it provided an opening for Heidi Beirich to claim with righteous indignation, John Tanton compared immigrants to bacteria. Now, when I read Beirich's piece, I didn't know the broader context. I cringed. I thought, oh, God, is this guy saying this about people who have just come across the Arizona border? But, of course, he wasn't. Tanton was talking about a process of demographic expansion that has been going on for hundreds of years and includes his own ancestors. But the SPLC and the NCLR saw their opening and they drove their campaign bus right through it, streaming a big banner that declares, John Tanton compared immigrants to bacteria. Janet Murguia of the NCLR took up the battle cry. When she went on CNN with Lou Dobbs at the beginning of the Stop the Hate campaign, she indignantly said of Tanton, he once compared immigrants to bacteria. Now, this report is written to defend the proposition that we should have a reasonable, respectful conversation of immigration that deals with central issues and does not look for sinister motivations. But it points out also that if FAIR wanted to conduct a similar attack, there is plenty of grounds to do it. You could begin with the organization's name, National Council of La Raza, which was very upsetting to Cesar Chavez, who said this, I hear about La Raza more and more. Some people don't look at it as racism, but when you say La Raza, you are saying an anti-gringo thing, and our fear is that it won't stop there. Today it's anti-gringo, tomorrow it will be anti-negro, and the day after that it will be anti-Filipino, anti-Puerto Rican, and then it will be anti-poor Mexican and anti-darker-skinned Mexican. Representative Henry Gonzalez of Texas, a liberal Democrat whom I developed great respect for covering the savings and loan scandal when he was chairman of the House Banking Committee, a tremendous man, said he described the party La Raza Unida as reverse racism, as evil as the deadly hatred of the Nazis. Denouncing what he called the politics of race, he said, quote, only one thing counts to them, La Raza above all. In recent years, as the NCLR has gained prominence in the political mainstream, the name has caused strains even within the organization. While some Mexican Americans say they have adopted the term La Raza without embracing its militant connotations, others have been uncomfortable with an organization whose very name emphasizes racial identity. Janet Murguia of NCLR acknowledged this difficulty in a 2008 interview with columnist Ruben Navarrete, who Ruben himself called the name a musty throwback to the 1960s. Here's what Janet Murguia said. We take a lot of heat for our name, and she acknowledged that there had been discussions about changing it. Then she said, but historically I think it is something that our community feels wedded to. Now, I very much regret that Janet Murguia became such a prominent figure in the campaign to smear FAIR, CIS, and numbers. I don't think that will do anything at all to promote a more reasonable country, a more reasonable debate, quite to the contrary. But I believe that Janet Murguia is a wonderful person from a tremendous family that I regard as an all-American family from Kansas with proud roots as Mexican Americans. But I'm sorry that she has decided to join forces with the SPLC in the smear campaign. I wish that she would acknowledge the historical record of the man who came up with the concept of La Raza Cósmica, from whom her organization takes its name. His name was Jose Vasconcelos, who lived from 1882 to 1959, very prominent politically, culturally in Mexico. Racist scorn permeated the writing of Jose Vasconcelos. He was obsessed with the notion of competition among races and nations, and he wrote of the Chinese this passage in La Raza Cosmica. And I see, Mark, I am up to almost 14 minutes, sorry. This is from Vasconcelos. We recognize that it is not fair that people like the Chinese, who under the saintly guidance of Confucian morality multiply like mice, should come to degrade the human condition precisely at the moment when we begin to understand that intelligence serves to refrain and regulate the lower zoological instincts. Vasconcelos envisioned a time when, quote, the lower type of the species will be absorbed by the superior type, inferior races will, upon being educated, would become less prolific, and the better specimens would go on ascending a scale of ethnic improvement. Now, this is strong stuff. It's explicitly based on eugenic and racist ideas. I don't think it should be a part of our debate now, any more than I think that much of what the SPLC should be a part of the debate. But ugly stuff is the specialty of the Southern Poverty Law Center, which, my opinion, plays a very cynical game of promoting intolerance and character assassination. And there is a big commercial motivation there. It's a game that I think can be called jihad for dollars. The SPLC has moved away from its early work in such poverty law fields as death penalty cases, employment rights, and voting rights, because Dees learned that he could take in more money by exaggerating the size and menace of the Klan. An editorial that accompanied the series that made the Montgomery Advertiser a Pulitzer finalist in 1994, it was a finalist in 1995, for its 9-day expose of Morris Dees. The editorial said this, that while the Klan deserves the scorn of all reasonable people, it had become a farce, and that the SPLC, critics of the SPLC were justified in saying that it, quote, focuses on an anti-Klan theme, not because the Klan is a major threat, but because it plays well with liberal donors. Our report notes that the best reporting about the SPLC in its early days, especially about their financial cynicism, comes from liberal publications. Ken's publication